Yeah, uh, yeah, uh, yeah.
All right, so question one. A client shows up for her first appointment with a young male social worker. She is hesitant and reluctant when answering the initial assessment questions from the social worker. About halfway through the appointment, she asks, "So, how old are you anyway?" What is the best response from the social worker? All right, so we have a client who's showing up for the very first time to meet with a young male social worker, right? So we know that this client, she's hesitant and she's reluctant when answering the initial assessment questions. So that right there already lets me know there has not been any trust established, right? So, halfway through this session, our client asked the social worker, "So, how old are you anyway?" As a social worker, how are you going to respond to a client when it's your very first time seeing them? They're hesitant, they're reluctant, and they're asking you, "So, how old are you anyway?" Are we going to do A? The social worker should not lie to the client and offer information about his age. No, this is not a good option. So we are going to rule this one out, okay? Let's look at B. The social worker should make a joke about the age difference between himself and the client to lighten the mood. Again, absolutely not. We're going to rule out B. We do not have any trust established with this client, so let's not make light of the situation because we know our client is hesitant and reluctant. So let's look at C. The social worker should explore why the client is asking the question to establish trust. Okay, let's hold on to C. This is not a bad option. So, D. The social worker should continue with the questions needed to complete the appointment without acknowledging the question. Absolutely not. We are going to rule out D. We do not want to continue on with our initial assessment questions and completely avoid what this client has asked us. So the best option will be C. We need to explore why this client was motivated to ask the social worker this particular question of, "So how old are you anyway?" Right? It may be that this client may be concerned about the level of experience that this social worker has. So, as the social worker, it would be advised to reinforce to the client that, I do have the skills, I have the knowledge that's needed to support you. And then, additionally, by asking that, you can continue to build on that rapport and gain that trust with the client. So, C is our best option. All right, question two. A single father comes to therapy to receive support in parenting his three children. The initial complaint includes issues with discipline and patience. The social worker is working with the father individually and offers a parenting support group as an additional resource. At the next session, the father confesses that he's unsure about attending the parenting group. How can the social worker seek to understand the client's reasoning? All right, y'all, so let's go through and highlight our key information. So I have this single father who is my client. He's coming to see you because he's like, "I need support in parenting my three children." So his initial complaint includes issues with discipline and patience. So, as the social worker, you begin working with this father individually. And during this one session, you offer a parenting support group as an additional resource. Now, what's critical here is at the next session, he tells you, "Hey, I'm unsure about attending this parenting group." So, as the social worker, what is going to be the best option down below to really understand the client's reasoning on why he is unsure about attending this parenting support group? Is it going to be A, The social worker can normalize the situation by discussing how other clients have felt unsure about attending support groups. Okay, let's hold on. A is not a bad option. Let's look at B. The social worker can ask the client if the schedule does not fit his availability. Okay, that's somewhat good, but that's not going to be our best option. And it's not going to provide any clarity on why this individual does not want to attend the parenting support group. So we're going to rule B out, okay? So let's look at C. The social worker can recognize that the client may not be interested in discussing his concerns in front of others. Again, C is not going to be our best option because with C, we are making kind of the assumption or our own decision on why the single father does not want to attend versus asking those open-ended questions to really figure out what is the client's reasoning. So we're going to rule out C. Let's look at D. The social worker can ask if there is a resource that the client feels would be more helpful. Absolutely not. As the client, they are coming to you as the social worker as the expert. It would be very odd for us to say, oh, okay, well, what do you think is the best resource? The client's going to look at you and say, aren't you the expert? You're supposed to be the one that's more knowledgeable, right? So we're going to rule out D, and A is going to be our best option to really understand what is the client's reasoning on why he no longer wants to attend this parenting support group. So it's so important as social workers that we start the conversation off by normalizing the client's feelings, as this is going to offer that opportunity to build upon that relationship with the client, right? And at some point in that conversation, that social worker can use silence and see if the client will actually provide a response on further insight on maybe his reluctance of attending that therapy group. So this is the best option to really support the single father. Question 3. Shiloh is a 3-year-old child who is reportedly struggling with behavioral issues. His parents state that he often acts out by pushing, scratching, hitting, running, or throwing objects. He is then scolded and put in timeout. The parental response can best be described as. All right, y'all. So our client is Shiloh. He is only 3 years old. And Shiloh is struggling with behavior issues, right? His parents inform you, okay, Shiloh's been pushing, scratching, hitting, running, and throwing objects. In my mind, Shiloh is showing out, right? So his parents, they then scold and then put him in timeout. So this scenario is asking us, what is this parental response? He's then scolded and put in timeout. Is this an appropriate consequence? In my household, it probably would have been growing up. But unfortunately, this is not going to be our correct answer. So what about positive reinforcement? Negative attention, or negative reinforcement? All right, so the correct answer to this one is going to be that negative attention. So what negative attention means is that attention is given to a person when they are misbehaving, right? So in this situation right here, Shiloh, he is acting out. So the parents give attention through scolding. So negative attention is ineffective because it increases the misbehavior instead of decreasing it, right? If we were going to look at positive reinforcement, this is when something desirable is given to the person to increase the appropriate behavior. And that's not what we see in this scenario. And then when we look at negative reinforcement, this is when something undesirable is taken away from the person to increase the appropriate behavior. All right, question 4. A 22-year-old female veteran has come to see a social worker over troubling dreams that have persisted long after her return to the United States. The dreams involve reliving combat experiences in which she sees the deaths of important colleagues. Together, the client and the social worker work to relieve and psychologically reconcile these events, allowing the client to discharge the pent-up emotions associated with them. This psychotherapeutic approach is known as, okay, y'all, this is a straight recall question, okay? I need to focus on, out of answer selections A through D, what is this psychotherapeutic approach, okay? What is critical here is that the client and the social worker, they are working to relieve and psychologically reconcile these events, allowing the client to discharge the pent-up emotions associated with them. This is what we need to focus on, okay? So if I am doing the things that we have highlighted in yellow, is that going to be considered reorientation? No, we're going to rule this one out. What about B, catharsis? Again, no, we're going to rule this out. C, purging. No, we're going to rule this one out as well. So process of elimination lets me know that this is abreaction. So this was developed by Carl Jung, right? So this involves relieving, retelling, and reorientating an experience to discharge any negative psychological burdens that accompany the experience. And the reason why abreaction is correct is I got this 22-year-old female veteran. She's been having troubling dreams ever since she came back to the U.S., right? And in these dreams, she's reliving combat experiences where she sees the deaths of important colleagues. So she and that social worker, they come collaboratively together and they are able to help that client discharge the pent-up emotions through abreaction. Again, relieving, retelling, and reorientating negative experiences. All right, question 5. A social worker is approached by the parents of a difficult child who tends to act out with tantrum behavior when asked to complete even simple and short chores. The social worker suggests the parents tell the child to go ahead, scream and yell, and get it out the way first. This technique is known as, okay, y'all, this is another recall question, okay? So let's go back in the scenario and let's highlight the most important things. So we are the social worker and our clients are the parents, right, of a difficult child who tends to act out with tantrum behavior. So they're coming to you as a social worker like, hey, I got this child, very difficult, has tantrum behavior, even when we ask those simple and short chores. So as the social worker, your advice is you tell the parents, hey, you go ahead and let that child scream, yell, and get it out the way. So what technique is this called? Is this antecedent reassignment, contracting, paradoxal direction, or consequent structuring? So for this one, this is going to be considered paradoxal direction. The reason we want to do this is this represents a cognitive approach to a behavioral change, right? So the cognitive approach, it sees the behavior as emerging directly from thoughts and cognition, and thus it can be best changed by either identifying, confronting, or altering those specific misconceptions and false beliefs. All right, question 6. A therapy group for teenagers has been in progress for 5 weeks. The facilitating social workers believe that it's time to assess the group's progress and identify any hindrances to improve its functioning. The facilitating social workers can obtain information related to the group progress in all of the following ways, except set. All right, y'all. So with this one, I am looking for the answer selection that would not be beneficial to obtaining information related to the group's progress, okay? But let's go back in here and let's really get a good understanding of what's been presented to us. So we have this therapy group with a focus of teenagers that's been in progress for 5 weeks, okay? The facilitating social workers, this is crucial, believe that, maybe it's time to assess the group's progress and also identify any hindrances to improve its functioning, right? So when I look through all of my answer selections, A through D, I am looking for the answer selection that would not be beneficial to obtaining information related to the group's progress, to assess the group, and identify those hindrances, right? So let's look at A. Feedback from the parents of the group members. Okay, this would actually be something that would be beneficial, right? Because I can have conversations with the parents to determine, have you seen any shift, any positive shift? Have you seen a negative shift, right? So getting that feedback from the parents would be something beneficial. So it's not our correct answer. All right, feedback from the group member schools. I don't really know about B, y'all, because where in our scenario does it mention that these teenagers are in school? So let's hold on to B, okay? Let's look at C. Evaluative tools for group. Mm. You know what? C is actually something that we would implement, right? We can include these evaluated tools within our group sessions to see if are we tackling the identified issues? Are we seeing any improvement? So C would not be our answer here. Let's look at D. Individual activities at the beginning and end of each session. This would actually be something that's beneficial to the group, right? So if we did these individual activities, this would give us information that's helpful to identify, are there any hindrances? Is this an effective tool for its overall group functioning, right? D is not going to be it. So our best answer is going to be B, feedback from the group member school. All right, so the reason B is going to be it is because the facilitators, one, they do not have consent to reach out to the schools to gain this information. So that right there is already in violation, right? So that's why B is going to be our correct answer. Also, the facilitators, they can keep track of the individual progress during the group activities during each session, right? And then with our evaluative tools, this can help provide an idea of the overall progress of the group. All right, question 7. Which of the client examples below show signs of being ready for termination? All right, y'all, so with this one, we are only focusing in on which one of these statements is really going to show me that my client is ready to be terminated. Let's look at A. A client who has been seen for 2 months is not showing progress and does not use this session time to discuss his feelings. Absolutely not. We need to keep this client involved and engaged, right? We haven't seen any signs of progress within 2 months. They are not ready for termination. B. A client has canceled the past 2 sessions 48 hours beforehand and has not yet paid his remaining balance. Although naturally we may be like, yes, time for this client to go, this is not going to be an appropriate sign for termination, right? So C, a client has been in therapy for 6 months and has actively participated in creating progress toward her goals. Okay, this is a strong possibility. I'm seeing growth in my client. So let's hold on to C. What about D? A client has started attending group therapy but confides with the social worker it may not be the best fit. Okay, we are going to rule this one out, right? The reason we're going to rule out D is even though they're in group therapy, they are not really sure that this may be the best fit. So, given that, I don't want to terminate my client. So, C is going to be our best option when we consider termination. So, with C, I'm seeing signs of readiness, right? I see those signs of readiness for termination because it includes my client attaining those treatment goals, right? The therapeutic relationship is no longer needed. And I see that the client's interests are changing, right? I don't see that this client is being a danger to self or others. So C is a really good option because it lets me know that this client has been actively engaged in therapy and has attained all of the goals that were set. So the other answer options would not be appropriate for termination based on the information that's provided in each line, right? So when a client is not progressing or using a time in session to discuss concerns, this should prompt you as a social worker to really focus on creating a safe space for that individual and seeking to build that trust and rapport. Now, when we look at answer selection B, this client keeps canceling. So if a client has canceled within the appropriate time listed in the cancellation policy demonstrated by the agency, this does not mean it's grounds for termination, right? Now, if the client chooses not to pay for the remaining counseling balance within the required time frame, now it's grounds for termination, right? Only if that client is not a danger to himself or herself or to others. All right, y'all. Question 8. This is another recall question. I have to have a sound understanding of what term is being presented to me. So let's dive into the scenario. So Franny is raising her 2 children alone, working full time, and caring for the mother who recently started wandering away from the house and becoming lost. Franny has started experiencing bouts of anger, followed by apathy. She feels she has more responsibility than she can handle, and that she has little control over the financial and physical safety of her family. Now, she continues being a responsible employee and a nurturing caregiver, but she's feeling the pressure. So, what is the correct term for Franny's problem? All right, so let's highlight everything that Franny has going on, right? So my client is Franny. I know she's raising 2 children alone. She's working full time, and she's the caregiver of a mother who recently started wandering away from the house and becoming lost, okay? Now, more about Franny. So she has these bouts of anger followed by apathy. And she feels like, you know what? I have more responsibility than I can handle. I have little control over the financial and physical safety of my family. But this is what's critical. Franny continues being a responsible employee and a nurturing caregiver, even though she feels the pressure of everything that we have highlighted in yellow, right? So, what would be the correct term for Franny's problem? Y'all, Franny is going through burnout. The correct answer is C, right? So, burnout is characterized by this feeling that one has more responsibility than what they control. Now, we don't see a change in Franny's outward behavior, right? So she's not in crisis and she's not exhibiting or presenting any symptoms of unusual anxiety. So, unfortunately, Franny's working through that motion, even though she's like, I'm angry, I don't have control over my physical, my financial safety. She's still that responsible employee. She's still a nurturing caregiver. Franny is experiencing burnout. All right, question 9. The social worker has 2 10-year-old clients from similar traumatic and abusive backgrounds. But one client seems more resilient and functions well. They're getting good grades in school, they're interacting well with friends, while the other client has become depressed and withdrawn, failing most classes, and has no friends. Which of the following is the first step to building resilience in the withdrawn 10-year-old? All right, y'all, for this one, our main focus needs to be on this withdrawn 10-year-old, okay? So let's go back into this scenario and let's really break it down. So we are the social worker. We have two 10-year-old clients who have a similar traumatic and abusive background. This right here is so important to pay attention to, okay? So let's highlight what we know about one of our clients. One client of this 10-year-old, they're resilient, they're functioning well, they get good grades in school, and they're interacting well with friends, right? Now let's bring our attention back to our withdrawn 10-year-old. This is what's important. So this withdrawn 10-year-old, they have become depressed and withdrawn. They're failing most of their classes, and they have no friends. So this scenario is asking me, what is that first step in building resilience in this 10-year-old? Is my first step going to be A, providing positive reinforcement? What about B, providing opportunities for the child to be successful? C, facilitating an attachment to a nurturing adult? Or D, encouraging the child to try different strategies? All right, y'all. So the correct answer for this one is it's going to be C. So the reason why we're going to select C is children who lack the resilience, they often are very fearful and they feel unsafe in the world. So because of that, we need to help identify them with an adult who can provide that safe haven for them. So this can be a parent, a family member, or another caring adult, right? The next step with this is now we need to provide that child with opportunities to be successful in order to build and regain that child's sense of self-esteem and rebuild that resilience within them. All right, y'all, last question. Question 10. A young adult male meets with a social worker to complete an intake meeting. During the appointment, the client makes inappropriate comments toward the female worker. He makes jokes about canceling the next appointment with the social worker so he can ask her out to dinner instead. What is the best response from the social worker? All right, y'all, so what's going on in this scenario? We have as our client this young adult male. He's meeting with the social worker for the very first time in an intake meeting. Now, during this appointment with the social worker, this client is making inappropriate comments. And he even went so far, he's like, let me make a joke about how I plan on canceling the next appointment so I can ask the social worker out to dinner instead. As a social worker, what are you going to do if a client is making inappropriate comments towards you and jokes about, maybe I'll take you out to dinner instead? Are you going to do A? Unfortunately, I cannot go out to dinner with a past or current client. Okay, we like it. Let's hold on to A. B, can you tell me more about why you came in today? Inappropriate. We are not going to do B. The reason why B is going to be ruled out is you are not addressing the fact that this client is making these inappropriate comments towards you, right? Kind of dismissive. We don't want to do that. So C, the comments you are making are not appropriate. I will need to close out your case. I can provide you with contact information of other local therapy agencies. Uh, this one is a little extreme, y'all. Yes, it may seem like this is appropriate, but C is very extreme because you immediately are saying what you're saying is inappropriate. I'm closing your case out. You are not giving that client an opportunity or a chance to apologize, right? Or D, Going out to dinner with a past or current client is inappropriate. We will need to consider transferring your case to another social worker at the agency due to potential disruptions to the therapeutic alliance. That's a really good option. So if I were to compare A and D, which one would be the best answer? D. This is going to be our best response to the client. The reason we would choose D over A, if you just say, unfortunately, I cannot go out to dinner with a past or current client, more than likely that client is going to ask you why, right? They're going to know, tell me more. So if we say D, we are providing that rationale of why this comment is inappropriate and the other possible or potential solutions that could be provided to them, right? So as a social worker, first and foremost, it's so important that we address inappropriate comments directly with the client, right? So the social worker has to inform the client that a transfer of the case must now be considered due to that client's comments, right? So the social worker should not completely ignore the client's comments in order to just continue treating them. It's kind of like gaslighting, right? Or the social worker should also not simply address the comments without further action of transferring the case. They need to know what are the alternative options. And lastly, the comments do not warrant the need to close the case to the agency completely, assuming that the social worker has qualified co-workers who can assume the case and provide what's needed for the client. So I really hope that y'all enjoyed completing these 10 questions. And if you would like to receive more help, I do offer both individual and group sessions. Please feel free to check me out on A Likely Transition, and I'm here to help you pass your goals, whether if that's going to be a LMSW or an LCSW. I am here supporting you and I'm rooting for your success.
Yeah.